Hello and welcome to part 2 of my video series about the scientific method. In this video, we're going to learn a brain tool that can help us to determine if an idea is likely to be true or not. It's basically a structured way to ask ourselves, what if we're wrong about something? And more particularly, how would you know if you were wrong? I call this tool Consider the Compliment. Before we get started, I want to make sure that we understand what a compliment is.
Dude, you're so logical and careful. I can tell it's really important to you.
Oh, thanks, man, but that's not really the kind of compliment I was talking about. Compliment, with an E, comes from the word complete. So two things are complements if, taken together, they make one complete whole. Like those little friendship necklaces with the two half hearts that fit together and say, BFFs forever. You know what I'm talking about. Remember that now. You probably learned the scientific method sometime in your life. Maybe you remember something like this from your middle school biology class. Or this. Or this. Or this. In the spirit of making things as simple as possible, I've summarized the scientific method into just 2 steps. Step 1 is to create a logical argument, a convincing theory that may or may not be true. Step 2 is to test that theory against the evidence in the world around us. In this video, I'm going to focus on the second step for now. We'll come back to that first step later. We said in the introduction video to this series that science is about waiting to accept an idea until after observing the evidence. This is how that works. We actually need to start with 2 ideas. One idea we want to test, and the complement of that idea. Remember, complements are 2 things that complete each other. The complement of an idea is what must be true if it turns out that your idea is not. Ideally, the 2 ideas that we are going to consider should be as different as they can be. Even more ideally, it should be impossible for both ideas to be true at the same time. For now, we're just going to settle for any 2 competing ideas or explanations. So instead of just looking for evidence that supports our current default belief about something, we need something else to compare it to. If you need help coming up with a belief that is different from yours, you could probably just spend about 30 seconds in the comments section of any popular social media post. Typically, actually, the whole process starts naturally when someone else challenges a belief that we have. So what we usually have is just our idea and someone else's. However we get there, once we have our 2 competing ideas, we're ready to begin. And in this corner, the reigning champion, fine-tuned over years of experience and confirmation bias. Put your hands together for your idea! And in this corner, an up-and-coming star, raised among deviants and contrarians, he's gained quite a following on social media. Please welcome to the ring, the Compliment! The next stage of Consider the Compliment is to think about what else is likely to be true if one or the other competitor beliefs are true. You can do this like making a pros and cons list before making an important decision. Split a piece of paper into 2 sections, one for each competing idea. Think about each idea in turn as if it is definitely true and describes the universe exactly as it is. This is the fun part, the creative part. Try to imagine the universe as simple as possible. Try to ignore any evidence you may or may not know about the situation, and just assume that all you know for sure is that the idea, either your idea or the compliment, is true. Then, what else is probably true? Fill out each section as thoroughly as possible. Go nuts! Make sure to consider both causes and effects that probably coincide with the idea. The more thoroughly and detailed you can describe this potential universe, the better. Once we've got 2 equally thorough lists, we can compare our reality with each of these lists and see which fits better. Sounds simple, right? Well, it is if we remember to do it. Let's try an example. Say you notice one afternoon that your fingers are starting to tingle in a strange way. You go online and Google what can cause finger tingling. You see a list of options ranging from dehydration, stress, and being tired, to something horrible and terrible and rare. Oh man, it could be this, but it could be that. Oh, what if it's that? This is a common way to approach this sort of thing. You start with some piece of evidence, what actually happened, and then you go back and look for a cause. But many potential causes exist. So, which is it? Now, if you've already asked Dr. Google for unlicensed medical advice, you've probably by now found a website with a list of other symptoms that are associated with each explanation. Seems like a good starting point for our lists. Have you been working hard lately? Not drinking enough water? Sleeping weird? Do you feel a high level of stress? Or like you may be missing some nutrients in your diet? Have you had a recent injury of some kind? Have you been diagnosed with a related condition? Or experienced other, more serious symptoms? Of course, when we're comparing our lists, it's not enough for one list to have more items that match reality. It's often a quality over quantity thing. For example, if we examine the evidence, and it turns out that it's still kind of a toss-up between the two theories, we can just think about which one is more likely and which is more rare. So, if it's unclear which malady befalls you based solely on the experiences and symptoms from your lists, you're probably safe in assuming that it is not the really rare possibility, simply because it is far less likely. That's in fact what rare means. And here is where I remind you that I am not a medical doctor, and that nothing I say should be considered medical advice. If you have any concerns about your health, please see your primary care doctor, etc., etc. This principle of considering the complement is a key reason why so many conspiracy theories are often dismissed by rational people, and why so few conspiracy theories turn out to be true. The entire basis of a conspiracy theory tends to be that there are many people conspiring together to keep some truth hidden from the masses. The problem tends to be that the bigger the conspiracy, the more people are required to both know about it and not talk about it. If we start making our lists of what we would expect to be true if some conspiracy theory were true, we should most likely include something about someone somewhere in the know potentially leaking the truth to the media, especially with the prevalence of recording equipment in everyone's pocket and the ease of sharing our experiences on the internet. On the other list, we might include that whoever wants you to believe in whatever conspiracy theory might actually just be trying to sell you something.
Buy gold!
Now, I want to give you some caveats to this process. Some important pro tips, if you will. First, when making your list of what else's, it's extremely important to try and treat each idea fairly in turn. A part of you is going to want to load the list of the idea you like the most with the things that you know match with the world around you. But if you're doing this exercise at all, it's hopefully because another part of you wants to honestly know the truth, as well as we can. Whenever we're doing science, we need to constantly remind ourselves which part of our brains we really want to be in charge of our beliefs. We need to remind ourselves to be open and honest, and to be ready to accept either idea. Next pro tip. After you've gone through this process of thoroughly considering the complement, and say we've determined that the evidence fits idea A better than idea B, we recognize that this doesn't mean that A is true, just that it is more likely than B given the evidence. So we can perhaps hold on to A for a while until something better comes along. I can already see some of you bristling against this idea. B is rejected for idea A, or later for idea C, or God forbid, more evidence comes up that brings us back to rejecting other theories in favor of B again. Who wants to live in a world like that, where beliefs are constantly being accepted and rejected and replaced with other beliefs? How unstable will we feel when our image of reality is constantly in flux? Or if loyalty is a virtue to you, maybe you're feeling icky about this process because of how disloyal it feels. Maybe you've been led to believe that if you accept something, you should be loyal to it. This, of course, may save some other people from their own existential discomfort. But as for understanding reality, being loyal to a false belief isn't going to be doing yourself any favors. We don't owe any allegiance or fealty to ideas, especially if it turns out that some of these ideas just aren't true. Now, I'm not suggesting we go around actively doubting every claim we come across. I honestly don't think we could. How exhausting. We really only need to invoke this careful process when beliefs are challenged. But maybe we set aside like one day a year when we actively examine our beliefs to see how well they match reality. Seems like a pretty good holiday tradition. Or if that's too much, maybe once a decade? But if we can get through the discomfort of rejecting and replacing our current beliefs with others as we get more evidence, or as we better understand existing evidence, we will still be wrong a lot. But we will most likely be wrong less often. Which seems like a pretty good thing to me.